When I first moved into the quiet little neighborhood on the edge of town, I thought I had finally found peace. My ranch sat on a wide piece of land, fenced, with horses grazing in a barn that had been standing for decades. To me, it was more than just property. It was heritage, a place where my father had taught me the value of hard work and independence. But what I didn't know was that this small community had its own gatekeeper. She wasn't elected, and she didn't wear a crown, but everyone knew who really pulled the strings. Her name was Karen, and she was a self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association. From the first week, I sensed she had an issue with me. She complained about the way my truck was parked near the barn, about the horses being too loud, even about the color of my mailbox. It wasn't long before she began sending me letters, long, typed warnings signed with the HOA stamp. They were ridiculous, each one escalating in tone, filled with rules that didn't even apply to my ranch. You see, my property wasn't technically inside their jurisdiction. My ranch had existed long, before the neighborhood sprawled out this far. The HOA had no legal claim over my land, but that didn't stop Karen. She believed that because my driveway cut near the entrance road, she had authority over me. And Karen, as I soon learned, didn't just enforce rules. She made them up as she went. At first, I ignored her. I thought she'd get tired when she realized I wasn't going to fold. But Karen wasn't the type to back off. She thrived on conflict, the kind of person who lived for the sound of her own threats. Soon, she was marching onto my land, snapping photos of my barn, measuring my fence with a tape measure, and warning me that I had one final chance to comply. The breaking point came one hot summer afternoon. I was fixing a fence post near the pasture when Karen showed up with 2 HOA board members at her side. They looked nervous, but she was brimming with arrogance, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She announced that I was in violation of multiple community standards and that I had 1 hour to vacate my property. I laughed at first, thinking it was another empty threat. But then she pulled out her phone, her voice loud and theatrical, and called the cops. She stood right there in my driveway, reporting me as a trespasser on my own ranch. Her words were sharp, deliberate, and meant to humiliate. She told them a dangerous man was refusing to leave HOA property, and that immediate action was required. I could feel the anger boiling in my chest. Watching her stand on my land, weaponizing authority she didn't have, I realized this wasn't about rules or property lines. This was about control. Karen wanted to prove she could push me out, just like she had intimidated so many of the neighbors. As she spoke into the phone, I calmly set down my tools and wiped the sweat from my brow. I knew exactly how this was going to end, because what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that she had just called the cops on the wrong man. I wasn't just a ranch owner. I wasn't just another neighbor who could be bullied. I was the county sheriff. And the badge I carried meant her threats had just crossed into dangerous territory. And as the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, I stood tall, waiting for Karen to realize the mistake of her life. The sirens grew louder as Karen stood proudly at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, with that smug little grin spread across her face. She truly believed she had me cornered. The 2 HOA board members shifted uncomfortably behind her, whispering to each other, clearly regretting that they had followed her into this mess. But Karen wasn't nervous. She was enjoying every second of it, convinced she had finally put me in my place. When the patrol cars pulled up, I recognized both deputies immediately. They were good men, ones I had personally trained when they joined the force. They stepped out of their vehicles, confusion already written across their faces. To them, this wasn't some emergency. This was my ranch, my land, and seeing Karen waving them over like she was in charge only made their expressions grow sharper. Karen launched into her performance before they could even ask a question. She pointed at me, yelling that I was a trespasser, that I was endangering the neighborhood, and refusing to comply with HOA rules. She demanded that they arrest me on the spot, her voice shrill and commanding as though she were giving orders. The deputies glanced at each other, and then at me. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my badge, and let the sun catch the shine of it as I held it in my hand. Their eyes widened, and they immediately understood the situation. Karen, however, didn't. She kept ranting, louder now, accusing them of not taking her seriously. She went on about how the community had spoken and how I was in violation of every bylaw imaginable. She had no idea that every word she said was digging her hole deeper. The deputies patiently let her finish, but the shift in their body language made it clear. They were no longer listening to her. When she finally noticed the badge in my hand, her expression faltered. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked unsure. The confidence slipped from her face, replaced with a nervous twitch at the corner of her mouth. She tried to laugh it off, saying it didn't matter, that the HOA still had power over my property. But her voice shook, and the deputies weren't buying it. They explained calmly, yet firmly, that my ranch was outside HOA jurisdiction. They told her she had no authority here, and that trespassing onto my land, photographing my property, and threatening me with eviction could be considered harassment. Karen's face turned red, her voice sputtering as she tried to backtrack. She claimed she was only doing her duty, that the entire neighborhood supported her actions. But the deputies had heard enough. They warned her to leave immediately, and that if she continued harassing me, the next call might not end so kindly for her. Watching her stand there, humiliated in front of her own board members, was a moment I won't forget. She glared at me, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed. She stormed off, dragging the board members with her, muttering something about coming back with lawyers. The deputies lingered for a moment, shaking their heads. They apologized for the disturbance, but I waved it off. It wasn't their fault. They knew as well as I did that Karen was a ticking time bomb, and this wouldn't be the last time she tried to pull something like this. Sure enough, the days that followed were filled with more letters, more threats, and more desperate attempts from Karen to assert control. She showed up with measuring tape again, scribbling notes on her clipboard, claiming that my barn was casting too much shadow on the neighborhood road. She even tried to fine me thousands of dollars for unapproved livestock activity. Each attempt grew more absurd, and each one failed. But Karen wasn't just stubborn. She was dangerous when cornered, and I could feel it building like a storm about to break. What she didn't understand was that she had crossed a line the moment she weaponized the law against me. And while I had been patient, while I had given her the benefit of the doubt, my patience was running out. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn a lesson she wouldn't forget. Because I wasn't just going to fend my land anymore. I was going to put an end to her reign of intimidation once and for all. HOA stories. Karen didn't disappear after that day. If anything, she doubled down. The humiliation of being dismissed by the deputies had only fueled her anger. I could see it in the way she patrolled the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, her eyes constantly darting toward my ranch like a hawk circling prey. She started holding extra HOA meetings, spreading rumors that I was abusing my power and threatening the safety of the community. Neighbors told me about her late-night rants, about how she promised to take me down no matter what it took. Some were afraid of her. Others were tired of her antics, but most just stayed silent. After all, Karen had been running the HOA for years. She knew how to pressure, intimidate, and twist rules until people bent to her will. But what she didn't understand was that her intimidation had no effect on me. I wasn't some neighbor afraid of a fine or a letter. I was a law in this county, and her endless harassment wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It was a crime. The breaking point came when she trespassed again. This time, she brought contractors onto my land without permission, claiming the HOA had approved construction to remove my barn because it was non-compliant. Watching strangers step onto my property with tools in hand was the last straw. I stopped them immediately, and when they realized who I was, they backed off quickly. But Karen, standing proudly behind them, declared that I was interfering with HOA operations. That was it. Enough warnings, enough patience. The very next morning, I drove down to the courthouse and filed a formal complaint. With the evidence I had collected, her letters, her trespassing, her attempts to illegally enforce power, there was more than enough to act. And because of my position, I knew the system would move swiftly. Within days, Karen was served with legal papers. An official cease and desist order landed on her doorstep, signed by the very court she thought she could manipulate. The order barred her from stepping onto my property, from issuing further fines or threats, and from interfering with my ranch in any way. When she realized this wasn't another empty warning, the cracks in her confidence finally showed. She tried to rally the HOA, but this time, the board members refused to back her. They had been dragged into her schemes one too many times, and now they feared legal consequences too. One by one, they distanced themselves from her, leaving her isolated. The final blow came during the next HOA meeting. Neighbors gathered in the clubhouse, and Karen, desperate to save face, launched into another tirade about me. But instead of cheers or nods, she was met with silence. The room had turned against her. People were tired of the drama, tired of her abuse of power, tired of living under her rule. By the end of the night, a motion was passed. Karen was officially removed as HOA president. It was over. From that day forward, the neighborhood quieted. The endless letters stopped. The threats vanished, and for the first time in years, the community could breathe without fear of Karen's clipboard. My ranch remained untouched. My barn stood strong, and the horses roamed freely as they always had. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of Karen driving by, her face bitter and her pride broken. But she no longer had the power she once wielded. She had tried to weaponize authority, and it had backfired spectacularly. For me, it was never about revenge. It was about standing firm, about refusing to be bullied off the land my family built with their hands. And in the end, that badge I carried wasn't just a symbol of the law. It was a reminder that real authority comes from protecting what's right, not abusing it. Karen had tried to take everything from me, but instead, she lost everything she thought she controlled. And as the sun set over my ranch, painting the fields in golden light, I finally felt the peace I had been searching for all along. End of story.